Hi, everyone. Thanks for hopping onto today's webinar. We are going to give it a few more minutes for some other attendees to stroll in, so we'll be right with you in about 1 or 2 minutes to start the broadcast. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get things started. My name is An Lee, and I'll be your moderator for today's Mendix in 30 product demo. Welcome to the session. We are going to kick things off fairly quickly, but there are a few housekeeping items I want to cover first. Our presenter today is Simon Black, our product evangelist at Mendix. He's been with the company and working with the platform for the last 6.5 years. We'll have a live 15-minute Q&A at the end of the demo. You can submit the questions to the right-hand panel of the GoToWebinar interface, and we'll get to as many questions as we can during that time frame. If we're unable to get to your questions, we'll make sure to follow up via email shortly after the webinar. A link to the recording of this demo will be emailed to the address you provided at the time you registered for the webinar. And lastly, we'd love to hear any feedback you might have to help us improve on our future demo sessions. At this point, I'll hand things over to Simon so we can begin the Mendix in 30 live demo. Simon?
Thank you for that introduction. So yes, I'm Simon Black from the Evangelist team here at Mendix. And today what we want to do is take you through a demonstration of the Mendix product and show you how we can collaborate and build together applications with both business and IT. So first of all, I just wanted to bring up this image to basically represent what Mendix is all about. So everyone within many organizations has this problem that they need to be able to deliver at speed. So everyone is talking about fast delivery, whether it be for customers, partners, or for internal employees. Today, customers expect a higher level of experience, whether it comes to UX, UI, and also when it comes to actually delivering on time. So you must be able to deliver at speed and be able to manage that speed. So one of the core products and one of the core features that makes Mendix so popular is the fact that we combine this speed with a level of control and collaboration. So these two ingredients are vital in order to be able to deliver speed. Without both control and collaboration, you will not be able to deliver that speed at a continuous rate and to be able to deliver the applications that you require. So in our analogy, for instance, if we're developing a Formula One car, we cannot deliver this Formula One car without a level of collaboration. Otherwise, we'll get a pile-up. We won't be able to actually see where that particular car has been driving and also make sure that it's delivered with a level of collaboration. And also, we need to be able to deliver with control. We need to know about how that particular car is performing. We need to know whether it is being built correctly. And the same concepts apply to application development. We need to be able to deliver applications with a level of control, so we know who has access to those, what applications are being developed. And we also need a level of collaboration to make sure that those applications are correct and we can build those first time correctly. So that gives you a very quick introduction as to why Mendix exists and what we're trying to solve as a purpose. In later sessions, we can go into a bit more detail around the company, but let's go into a short demo and show you what the product is all about. So first of all, I'm going to open up an application that has been pre-built with the Mendix product. This application is both a web application and also a mobile application. So you see here on the right-hand side here, I have my mobile application. And our application is a claims management application. What this allows us to do is it allows us to go through a number of steps within the application to submit a claim on our insurance product. So using conversational UI, we can make this an experience, a very rich experience for the user, and we can make it easy enough to be able to claim for your insurance within a 5-minute period. Now, on the mobile device, we can use native device functionalities like the date picker here, but also push notifications, swiping, and also transitions. But the way we build both these mobile applications and tablet applications and also desktop is exactly the same. We model the application rather than coding the application. So let's go and have a look and see how we do that. So I'm going to switch to the desktop application here, and I'm going to look at a process for a tracker claim. So within this process, we can chat to an online chatbot. This is using IBM Conversational UI to allow us to chat to a particular chatbot about our claim process. We can then augment this with certain data from the Mendix application so that we can give status updates on the actual claim progress. But as we're going through this application, we might decide that we want to make a change to this application. We might be coming along as a business user or a tester and decide that we want to make a simple change to this user interface, and we want to do that in the browser. So on the right-hand side here, we have an Edit in Web Modeler button. And what this does, it will open up the application in our online development tool. This is what we call the Web Modeler, recently released within the last few months. And what it allows you to do is it allows you to build out your application in this web interface. And it's a full what you see is what you get interface, allowing you to build out the user interface, the data structures, and also the logic within your application. So here we go, we can see the page that we had available in our online application. So here, this is actually the development tool, and we can develop for both mobile, tablet, and web. And we can then start to build out our user interface. And the way we do that is we build it out using building blocks and also widgets. So we can drag on these building blocks from the right-hand side here. And building blocks are pre-designed, good-looking templates based on your own company and organizational brand that accelerates the development of these pages. Now, the Web Modeler is designed to take a design thinking approach to development, so you can actually build from the pages without having to understand anything to do with SQL statements, around coding and so on. You can start building the application from these pages. So in these building blocks, we have things like cards for overviews of maps. We have building blocks for forms, wizards, and so on, which can simply be dragged and dropped onto these pages. We also have components which are called widgets, and widgets are lower level components, and a number of widgets will build to create a building block. So in our case, what we want to do is we want to be able to add a button onto this section. We want to be able to take the text that we have available on our chatbot, and we want to translate it. We want to be able to translate that into Spanish, for instance, and we want to be able to see that in our browser so that we can actually see the translated text in the application. So the first thing we need to do is we need to create a button. We need to be able to go to a page where we can actually select the language that we want, and we can actually then see the translated text. So from our building blocks and widgets, I can drag onto here a button. So we have several different types of buttons. In our case, we wanted to drag on an open page button. I can simply drag this into the section here and double click on it to start entering in some text for the actual button. So I can say translate. And also on the right hand side here, I can select a number of properties. These properties are design properties, and these can all be configured and customized for your own organizational brand. So if I want to change it so that the style is of the success button and it's green, and I also might want to have that as a full width button. As I said, all of these are configurable. You can change these for your different organization. So now I've created that button, I need it to do something now. And what we want to do is we want to open up a new page so that we can actually translate that text. If I click the page icon here, I can then select to create a new page. When we do so, we're brought up a list of different types of page templates. And these page templates are based on best practices design patterns from Mendix. But you can also add your own design patterns and best practice page templates from your own organizational brand. So we're going to call it translation. We're going to select a layout for our particular application. And the layout is essentially the structure for your page. So the header, the footer, and so on, which allows you to reuse those layouts across multiple different pages. We're then going to select a page template of form horizontal and hit create. What this will now do is it will create us our dummy page where we can actually start to build out what input fields that we want on this particular page and what logic we also want to apply in this application page. So we've got some example fields on here, but if I want to select and add those to the actual chat message, I can simply from the attribute section select a number of attributes that are already available in the domain structure. I will show you later how you can add new attributes, but just now I just want to select the text item, and I also want to be able to have a drop down for the translated text. So I'm going to delete some of these columns here, and I'm going to drag on a drop down from our widget section. So if I select here and drag it onto the building blocks here, I can then select a properties and select an attribute for this drop down. I'm going to select the target language. As I do so, and when I connect it up to a particular input field, it will automatically pre-fill the label for me so that I can actually very quickly build out this page. So the last bit we want to add on is we want to add on another text box, which is where we want to store the actual translated text. So we can select that here now, and we can then see, for instance, our text that we get back from the IBM chatbot. We'll then be able to select the target language and also select the translate and see the translated text. The next section we want to do is we want to add some actual logic. What we want to do is we want to take that text, we want to send that to the IBM Watson services so that we can actually translate that text and see that on our page. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change this text here so that it says translate rather than save. And I'm going to hook this up to a new type of button. This button is what's called a mic flow. And mic flows are where you perform logic in an application. Instead of coding a logic, we build those in mic flows. And I'll come on to mic flows in a second and show you a more in-depth mic flow. So we're going to create a new mic flow and we're going to call this translate text. So when we click this button, it will execute this particular mic flow, and then it will then execute that logic when we click the button. So in this application, when we've created this particular mic flow, it's created us a first input field. So we've got one input to our flow. We've got a start event and also an end event. So this is the second concept within Mendix. The first one was our pages. The second one is the mic flows. And the third one I'll come on to in a second. So if we take a look at a more complex mic flow, we can see here this is a number of steps, a number of activities, and also a number of decisions. So we have a number of inputs. In this case, we have an integer and also a string for a name. And we can then retrieve some data from our database. We can make some decisions and create additional objects as well. So we don't need to know anything about SQL statements. We don't need to know any coding. It's a simple drag and drop interface where we can build out our logic for our application. So the web modeler is limited in the functionality that is provided, and that's for good reason. We're trying to actually bring a level of control, but also bring a level of collaboration. So this web modeler is designed for business users who have never developed before. They want to be able to quickly build out an application, but we also want to have control over what they can and can't build. So in the web modeler, for instance, they can't build things like integration. They also can't build things like custom Java actions, which are available in our desktop modeler. And I'll come to that in the next flow. But the desktop modeler allows you to do much greater things within the application. So here we're bringing in that level of control and collaboration together so that you can actually develop at speed with both business and IT users at the same time. So the next thing we want to do is we actually want to publish this application. We want to deploy this application and view that application in our browser so we can see those changes. And we might want to implement further functionality in our later flow. So if I hit the publish button and hit update, what this does is it takes our application, it packages it up, it deploys it onto a Cloud Foundry node running on top of AWS and allows us to run and view that in our browser. You can deploy unlimited applications for free using the Mendix free cloud nodes and deploy and start to build out your applications. So whilst it's deploying, I'm just going to go over this third concept of what we call domain models. And domain models are where we build out our data structure. So any data we're going to interact with, whether it be stored in a database of our choice or on a third party, we can pull data in memory, which allows you to view that on the screen. And once it's no longer needed, it will then be removed. So simply by dragging and dropping on the domain model, we can start to build out tables such as tables for our customers, claims, and also have references between those so that we can have multiple claims against a particular customer. This is what this association is here. Within the domain model, we can start to drag and drop certain items onto the page. So for instance, if we wanted a note field, we can add that into the model very, very easily and start to build out those attributes, those entities within our data structure. So now that it's run, we can now view that in our browser and we can actually see those changes and we can start to test that application. So here we're going through this application now. We're obviously introduced to our particular chatbot that we're chatting to. And we can now decide to make a claim, to track a claim, sorry. And we've now got this button for our translation option. So when we hit this, it will fill in our text field at the top here. And we've got the option to select a particular language. Now, when we press this button, it doesn't do anything because we haven't implemented that logic. We want to implement that logic using our desktop modeler. And to do that, we usually have to have someone that's perhaps had a bit more experience with development. They might need to customize and create some custom Java or integrate to something that's already on the App Store. So to do that, first of all, we're going to create a change request. We're going to do that via creating a feedback item. And on the right-hand side here, we have a feedback button. On every Mendix application, you have a feedback button, which allows you to capture ideas, issues, and questions from your end users, testers, or developers. All of this feedback will go into our central project management portal, which allows you to manage that feedback and also start to create requirements as well. So I'm going to submit a feedback item that I want to implement. I want to implement the logic for the actual translation feature. So I'm going to add my name, my email address, and also add, would like a translation feature. Add some additional information. I can also upload some files and also include screenshots of any pages that I was on at a particular time. So now when we submit this feedback, we will now get a feedback item and we can track that feedback through a number of processes. So all of that feedback will go into our central project management portal. So this is what we call Mendix Home, and this is where we will collaborate with people within our company and also start to create projects together. So I have a list of projects on my right-hand side here, and I already have one set up for this particular demo. So in this project, we have a number of different team members. Those team members could be developers, they could be end users, and also business users, which allow you to configure and control and secure your application to make sure that certain users can only do certain things in the project. So all the feedback that is submitted, it goes into our feedback section. And this is where we can control what goes into our product. And a product owner can make a decision as to whether we're going to work on this or not. So when we drill down, we can see some more information about what the user was requiring, and also what page and browser the user was on at the time. So all really useful information, especially when you're debugging as an end user or tester, and also useful information for the product owner to make a decision as to whether we're going to work on this user story or not. So Mendix works in an agile methodology, specifically Scrum, and the whole project management portal is designed around Scrum methodology, making it very, very easy to be able to make user stories and changes to those particular applications. So in our case, we're going to accept this feedback and we're going to identify it as a feature and mark it for our current sprint. So we work in sprints of 1 to 2 weeks, allowing you to very rapidly build out your application. So now that I've accepted that feedback, what it will do is it will actually convert that feedback item now into a user story. So this is where more of the collaboration comes into it. You can create user requirements and user stories with your business and IT users and comment on those in the central portal. So you can actually have a complete dialogue, a complete history of everything that's been discussed for your particular user story. So we can see now that we've turned that feedback item into a user story, and we can now decide to start working on that. So to implement that logic, we're going to switch into our desktop tool. So Mendix tries to span the whole different types of developers, from people that have never developed before, such as your citizen business developers, through to your traditional developers. So everything in between is covered within the platform. So being able to do drag and drop user interface with what you see is what you get, through to coding Java and coding JavaScript for extensions on the front end and back end. You can simply switch between the different models by hitting the Edit App button in each of the projects, and you can switch between the web modeler and desktop. Both models are kept in sync so that you can actually make sure that those changes are exactly the same in both of the development tools. So I'm going to switch to the development tool here now, which is a local install on my machine, where I can develop the application locally, and I can start to develop that application. So the first thing that we want to do is we actually want to extend this flow that we created earlier. So we'll have a button which will allow us to translate a particular section. So I'm just going to create that again. Okay. So we have the same flow here that we had earlier, and we can start to implement the new logic now. So in the actual desktop modeler, we have a few more activities. So we have the option to call out to any REST or SOAP service, but also call and create custom Java actions as well. So it's an extension on top of the web modeler interface, but they work in exactly the same way. You build using models rather than coding. So the next thing we're going to do is we need to download a new connector. So Mendix has the option to extend both on the front end with custom JavaScript and also on the back end with custom Java. And once you've built these, you can actually share these and put these onto the App Store. And the Mendix App Store comes in two flavors. We have a public App Store that's available to everyone within the community, but we also have an enterprise private App Store. So every company that signs up with Mendix is able to have their own private App Store, share certain content on there that's only available for developers within their organization. So we want to download the Watson connector. And there's thousands of connectors on this App Store, from things like connecting into your SAP systems through to your IBM systems, all the way through to kind of front-end extensions for push notifications and so on. Can all be downloaded from this library and then extending the application. So we're going to download the Watson Translate service. And once this is downloaded, it will add it into our application, allowing us to start using that functionality. So as you can see at the bottom here, what it's been doing when we're developing is constantly monitoring all of those changes. So we have consistent version control within the application, allowing you to build out your application and manage things like branch lines, version control, and so on within your application. So I'm going to add on a new activity, and the first activity I'm going to add on is the Watson Translate option. So it allows us to have native dialogues within the actual mic flow, so that we can use them as if they're an activity that has come out of the box. First thing we need to do is we need to pass it the text that we want to translate. So this is going to be the text. The second one that we need to select is what language we want to translate to. The source language that we're going to use. And then we're going to then select the translation as well, the translated language that we want within the model, the target language. We're then going to give it a name of translated text so that we can use it in our application. The second step we want to do is we want to add a new activity so that we can actually show that on our page, so we can actually see that particular logic and we can see the translated text now. So let's add on a change option so that we can change that data. And we're going to set the translated text to the text that's returned back from our Watson service. Here we go. We're going to save that to the database and also refresh in the client so that we can actually see that in our user interface. So now what we've built is that message will be passed when we click that button. It will be passed to the Watson translation services. It will then be stored in an object and refreshed on our screen. So the last piece of logic that we probably want to do is it would be nice to actually be able to hear that particular logic, be able to hear that translated text be spoke to us via our audio. So we're going to add on a new activity, and this activity is going to open up a page so that we can actually use the translation services from Watson and also use the speech to text, the text to speech services from Watson as well. So we can take that translated text, turn it into an audio file and allow us to hear that. So I already have one of those pre-built just to save some time. And within this flow, we can call the text to speech service. It will synthesize that into an audio file, and then it will show us a page where we can actually see and we can view and hear that audio. So now that we've developed that, we now want to run that. We want to run that locally so that we can actually see that particular change, and we can then start to complete that particular user story. So what it's doing here is when we run the application, it will compare our model against the current application and do all the updates that are necessary. So if we've added extra attributes into our domain model, it will create those in the database for us and update all of the pages that are necessary. Once it's run, we can then view that in our browser, and we can then start to view that functionality that we've implemented. Okay, so we can hit track a claim, which will open up our chatbot functionality. We can see that Pippa is typing. We might want to ask Pippa a question about our claim. Track the progress of my claim. There we go. She will then respond, asking me, okay, well, what is your claims reference? So now we might want to actually translate that. We might want to translate that into Spanish, for instance. So we can click that translate button. We can select the Spanish language, hit translate. What this will now do is it will take that text, send it to the IBM Watson services, so it will translate the text first, and then also translate. Okay, so we've very quickly built a translation service, taken that translation text, and then we've sent that to a audio service so we can actually view and hear that particular text translated to us in an audio format. So very quickly, we've shown you how you can actually very quickly build both in the web modeler and also in the desktop modeler so that you can combine different types of developers. So you can have collaboration and also control. And all of the changes that we make and we do to the application are controlled through the desktop modeler so that we can actually control what goes into those releases and what's deployed onto our servers as well. So as we're going through the application, we can, from the desktop modeler, we can view those user stories, and we can also mark when they're done as well. So we're going to mark this one as currently running, and we're also going to commit all of our changes that we've made into our central version control system. So we're having constant control over what is going into our application and tying those particular revisions back to certain user stories. So we can see here, we've now got our running user story, and we can then commit those changes and tie back that user story. So working on translation, commit those back into our central repository so that they then become available and then be available for a deployment into a server of your choice. So I'm just going to switch to the actual project management dashboard again. So we've done all of our changes now. But with Mendix, we control and help with the whole application lifecycle. So not just the development part we speed up the whole application lifecycle. Everything from gathering requirements, developing your application, deploying your application, and finally monitoring your application. So every application will come with a number of environments where you can manage out those deployments into test, acceptance, production. You can deploy those and stage those in your application. You can also take any of the applications you've built and you can deploy those out into an iOS application or into an Android application, allowing you to use native device functionality like push notification, GPS, camera, and so on, or augmented reality, for instance, within your application. So it's a one-click publish. We use PhoneGap technology to do that, which will wrap up your application, allowing you to use those native device functionalities. So finally, we have a full metrics capabilities where you can monitor out your application, you can view trends, you can see what's running now, you can also view alerts and logs within your application. So it's a full DevOps stack allowing you to both build very rapidly, but also control that application as well whilst you're developing that. So very quickly, in the last kind of 30 minutes, I've gone through the whole platform on how you can take an application and how you can build an application, but also how you can monitor and maintain that application. So just to summarize, Mendix combines both speed, collaboration, and control to provide a unified platform, allowing you to transform the way you develop applications. So without having both the speed, collaboration, and control, you cannot develop the applications that you want and continue to develop those at the speed that you require. So that's really what makes Mendix unique. And hopefully I've been able to convey that to you in the short period of this demo. So thank you. I think we'll open up for any questions now as well.
Great. Thank you, Simon. So it looks like we have a handful of questions that have come in. I do want to make a reminder that any questions we're unable to answer in the next 15 minutes will be responded via email. The first question that we actually have come in is referencing the translation portion of the demo. It is, where do you configure the Watson connection credentials?
Yes. So when you download the module, there is a configuration section. So that's something I didn't show in this demo, just for speed and purpose. But there's a configurations module where you can actually set up, your API keys, your configurations, and so on within the application. So when you go to the App Store and you download that component, there is a number of documentation that come with the actual component. And in the documentation, it will tell you how to get your application set up and also what you can do to actually configure that within your application. So there's a number of documentation here showing you how to set it up and also how to configure it for each of the services as well.
Great. So the second question that we have is, does Mendix integrate with Jira or JIRA? My apologies for not actually knowing the technical way to say this.
That's fine. Yes. So every part of the platform comes with an API. So you've seen the user stories, you've seen the actual modeler, you've seen the deployment process. Every part of the platform has an API. So yes, so if you want to integrate into Jira, you can easily do that using our APIs that come out of the box with the platform so that you can integrate into that Jira pipeline. Also, if you want to build your own configuration management and also build your own continuous deployment, we also support deployment via Docker, via Kubernetes, but also using continuous integration deployment using things like Jenkins. So you can create your own build pipeline and integrate that into your different services as well.
Awesome. The third question actually is there a separate university version of the platform, or is it what you showed is what we'd get?
Yes, so everything you see is what you get. So you can download today and start building unlimited applications for free, and you can deploy those to unlimited application nodes as well. So everything I've shown you today is available and open. For our universities as well, we do have a university program where we can also provide production nodes as well for your university classes as well. So that's the only addition. If you sign up as a university with Mendix, you will also get an educational package as well with a number of production nodes.
Great. The next question I have, I'm just going to have to read this out because I wasn't able to make sense of it. So I was a little late, but based on what I saw, how resource heavy is during development and how is the code used optimized for a given environment?
Yep, sure. So actually no code is actually generated by the Mendix product. So we are a meta model driven application. What that means is that everything that's generated within the Mendix product is essentially metadata. So we're not actually generating any code with the application. The code, the runtime will execute those models and will decide what needs to be sent to the HTML page. So it's an Ajax client on the front end, and also on the runtime environment, it's a Java Scala runtime environment, which will interpret those models. So we're not actually executing code, and we're not also generating code. So therefore, we can optimize the actual meta models and make certain decisions based on situations. And also it allows us to do things like hot deployments because we're not doing any code compiling. So there's two different ways of model-driven development. That's what Mendix does. There's one which is model execution, which is what we do, and there's another which is code generation. And we feel that model interpretation is a much better way of doing model-driven development because there's no chance of changing code. You can't break the model because the model is always executed by the runtime environment.
We have time for a few more questions. The next one is it necessary or a must to use in-memory database of Mendix, or can data be pulled directly from legacy apps?
Yes, so data can be pulled from legacy applications. So if you want to do a simple connection into an existing database, you can do that via our database connector, which is available on the App Store. And you can pull data through using a simple SQL query, using things like JDBC as a connection. Alternatively, if you want to pull data from another application via a REST or SOAP service, we have native integration within the model to allow you to do that. So you can go into the model, you can then create certain mappings between data from your existing web service via REST or SOAP, and then import those into the application. That data can then be stored just in memory rather than storing it in a database. But the database that you do choose with Mendix can be on any database type that you like. So when you connect the Mendix model up to a database, it will then automatically create that in any kind of database type that you like. So a relational type database, such as Postgres, MySQL, Oracle, Microsoft SQL Server, MariaDB, and so on.
Great. The next question we have is Mendix a good fit for small businesses that would like to enhance their go-to-market capabilities from a technology perspective, or is it targeted to big companies with a dedicated development team and big budget?
So the good thing about Mendix is that because we are model-driven development, we're using models rather than coding. You don't have to have a large development team. A typical project when working on Mendix is around 1 to 2 Mendix business engineers. So we're about 70% less resources than you would when you're developing an application in traditional coding. So that it makes it very suitable for organizations on enterprise level, but also on small businesses. You can start today and build an application and run it for up to 10 users for free on Mendix. Once you go above that 10 users, then that's how we charge. So you can very, very quickly build those applications, try and see whether it's going to work for your business without any cost. So I think it's very ideal for both small organizations up to your enterprise organizations as well.
Great. Okay, so 2 more questions. The next one is, how much work is required to integrate this with other systems? Is there a database containing definitions with hooks that needs to be maintained, databases, definitions, credentials, paths, etc.?
No, so every connection can be built using the Mendix model, and you can easily build out any integration to any system. So what's probably cool is I just show you. Often seeing is believing. So I can very quickly, let's take an example REST API. I can simply take the data from the API. And what we do when we build out the interface is we build what we call a mapping. And the mapping allows us to control what data comes in and also transform it as well. So I'm just going to create a new module. So API. I can then start to build out my integration, whether it be on REST services or SOAP services. So let's take a JSON structure. Let's pass that in there. I can format it. I can refresh it. Now this has created a structure. We now need to create a mapping so we can actually use that data and be able to control it as well. So I'm going to add a new mapping. And I'm going to import that data. So I'm going to create an input mapping, use our structure. From that structure, it will automatically recognize what is a list, what is the different data structures and so on. I can expand that list, check all of those. And you can now see we've got a mapping process here. So we've got on the right-hand side here, the data we get back from our external system. And then I can simply press automatically map. And that will create us all the data that we need for this particular mapping. So it will create us the data for our particular users, their address, their geolocation, and so on, which we can then start to use in our application. Now, when we come to actually call that service, we create a microflow. So this will call the actual service. So we don't have to write any code with this application. We just have to put an activity on here. We can say call the REST service. We can then give it a location, which is the location here. And we can then say what we're going to parse it with. So we're going to parse it and we're going to respond to map it with our data. So there we go. So I very, very quickly built a mapping, but also a call into that service as well. So exactly the same can be done with a SOAP service as well, or any XML, JSON-based structure you can import very easily within your application. Also, from one click, we can also publish any of these flows as a service as well. So that makes Mendix very, very easy to integrate into your existing systems, but also make it available for your other applications as well. Does that make sense? I hope that's. I hope I didn't lose too many people, but I always like doing that anyway.
So that was actually great. So the last question I have here is, how is versioning of the app handled in the modelers if multiple developers are working on features?
Yep. So I showed you a little bit of that earlier. When we come into the model here, we can see that we've got all of the changes. So it's all version controlled, so that we can see all of the changes that have occurred. And we can have multiple developers working on this particular project. So if I hit the history, for instance, I can see who's been committing in what. I can see different developers and so on. And I can also create multiple branch lines as well. So I can create branch lines within the application and merge those into the application. Now, I showed you earlier the web modeler interface as well. So everything that people do in the web modeler is done on a branch line. So when you come to then deploy that into a production node, you can choose what parts of that web modeler changes are then brought into the main line. So you can control what goes into your version and what goes into your application.
Great. So that's it for today's session. Again, please provide us with any feedback that you might have so that we can improve our demos moving forward. Thank you again for attending.